All right, in this project, we will be creating a top-down zombie game. This type of game, we will learn how to create top-down movement by having the player follow and aim towards the mouse touch. We will also be adding a difficulty increase for our zombie waves. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Alright, so in this section, we're going to set up our zombie game. We're going to start off by creating a new project for our game. Then we're going to go ahead and navigate to where we can download our free assets. Then we're going to go ahead and import those assets into our new game art folder. Let's go ahead, jump right in, and get started. Alright, let's create our new project for our zombie game. Let's go to the top left to create. Let's go ahead and give it a name. I'm going to call it zombie_game. I'm going to leave it in that same directory path right there. Leave everything else the same. Let's go ahead, create and edit. Let's let this load. Might take a second or two. Awesome. Here we go. All right, next thing we're going to do is we're going to click into our 2D view right over here. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and create our art folder also. So let's right click over here, create new folder, and just call this art. Go ahead, hit enter, save what you got. All right, so far so good. All right, next up, we're going to download the assets we're going to be using for this game. This is going to be at kenny.nl/assets/top-down-shooter. I'm going to put this link in the description as well. So go ahead, download this. Once you've downloaded it then, let's go ahead, open up in the File Explorer. Let's go ahead, right click on that .zip we have, extract all. Go ahead, select extract. Let that load, gonna take a second or two because it has a lot of items in it. And there we go, awesome. I'm gonna go up one, and there's our Kenny_top-down-shooter. Let's go ahead and drag and drop that into our art folder. Let that load, might take a second or two. Let's ensure it's in the art folder. It is not, so we need to drag and drop it from there into the art folder. Let that load. And we should be good. If we open up that art folder, we should see all of our items in here. Let's just double check to make sure they're all here. Awesome. We got our PNG, sprite sheets, tile sets, vector, and license, and all that stuff. Awesome. All right. Don't forget to save. So far, so good. All right. So in this section, we're going to create our main scene for the zombie game. We're going to start off creating the main scene with a node 2D. Then we're going to go ahead and add a background for the game. And last but not least, we're going to create a camera 2D as well. Let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, let's get started. So let's go ahead and create the main node first. That's going to be the 2D scene up here. Let's create that. There's our node 2D. Awesome. Let's rename this though. I'm going to call this Arena because it's going to be our game's arena. Awesome. Once we have that there, let's go ahead and add the next thing, which is going to be the background for our screen. So let's right click, add child node, and simply add a node 2D, which will be the parent of our background objects. Let's go ahead and just call this background. Perfect. Now inside this background, we're going to add a bunch of different sprite 2Ds, similar with the last project. So let's right click, add child node, sprite 2D. Awesome. All right, let's go ahead and pick out the sprite we want to use. I'm going to open up the PNG folder, and then I'm going to look for tiles right over here. Awesome. Now I'm going to use the wooden planks tiles. So if you scroll down, you should see one of them here. Now you can use either one you want. I want to use the 142. So the tile_42.png. Let's drag and drop that onto our sprite 2D. Awesome. All right. Now I don't hate the size. I kind of like it. We can make it a little bigger though. So let's go ahead to the transform. Let's go ahead and change the scale to 2. There we go. Awesome. Next up is the texture. Let's open that up. Let's change that to nearest. Awesome. Looks a little clearer. Now, you know what? I think, let's see. It still looks a little big. So let's go ahead and change this maybe to like 1.5. There we go. I like that. Let's bring the positions back to 0 though, so we can make sure everything will be coordinated correctly. All right, so I'm going to go ahead now and simply make sure I'm selecting it, and then hold down Control D, and then just move it over. I'm going to do just enough so it's covering that little area in between. As you can see, there is a little line, so we have to go back just a little bit. There we go. Let's go ahead and continue that. There we go. And one more. Perfect. I'm going to go ahead, hold down the Shift key now, select the lowest one there, and simply Control D, and then just move it over. Perfect. Control D, and move it over. Control D, and move it over. Now we have a couple extra back over here, so I'm going to go ahead and just select those and get rid of them. So I'm going to get rid of the one there. I'm going to get rid of the one there, and get rid of the one here. Now these other ones are sticking out a little bit, but that's okay. Now of course we need to make this go down all the way, so let's go ahead and select all of them inside of it. Just like that. Make sure we're using the Move tool. Control D, and just simply move it down. Control D, and just keep going until we get to the bottom. Keep going, almost there. One more, and perfect. Awesome. All right, sweet. Let's go ahead and close our background because we're not going to be messing with this anymore. We do need now to create our camera 2D. So let's go ahead, right click on the arena, add child node, camera 2D, make sure it's selected, go ahead and create. Now let's line this up with our screen. So let's go ahead and simply just move this over, bring it all the way down, and just match it up. Should be pretty much the same. Awesome. All right, let's go ahead and hit play and make sure we can see all of this. I'm going to save that, Control S. We're going to save this as our main scene. There we go. Let's go ahead and hit play, select current scene, let this load, and there we go. Awesome. Perfect. So our main scene is now created. All right, so far so good. All right, so in this section, we're going to be creating the UI and the timers in our main scene. We're going to be creating UI objects for both the score and the high score. We're also going to create a couple timers for the enemy spawner and the wave difficulty. We're also going to add one more timer for the camera shake. Let's go ahead, jump right in, and get started. All right, let's get started. Let's create the UI objects first. We're just going to create a simple score at the top and a high score at the bottom. So let's go ahead and create that. Let's right click on the arena, add child node, and we're going to go ahead and start this off with not a sprite 2D, a node 2D. And we're simply going to call this UI. Then inside this UI, we're going to add a control, add child node, control. If you remember, a control is kind of like our panel container for all of our UI objects. We don't have to put them inside a control, but it's just better for the long run. So let's go ahead and stretch this out to the same size as our screen. Just like that. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just want to put it something like that. Maybe you can move it down a little bit. Awesome. All right, great. Next up, we need to add the actual labels for the text. So let's right click on our control. Let's go ahead and add a label. This one here is going to be for the score. So let's go ahead, change this name to capital S score. Perfect. Let's go ahead and make it a little bigger. This one's going to be pretty big. And let's go ahead and just move this over somewhere in the middle. That's pretty good. Awesome. Let's go ahead and for now we're going to equal this to 100. That's not going to be our starting score. That's just going to be a placeholder. Let's go ahead and center it. Let's set all the alignments to center. Awesome. All right, let's go ahead and increase the font by giving it a label settings. Let's go ahead, click on it, font, and simply set this to something like, let's see how 100 looks. Maybe a little bigger. Let's see what 130 looks like. Awesome. I might just move it up a little bit with the pointer tool. Looks like I can't do it there. Maybe I will just go ahead and move it up like that. Awesome. All right, let's go ahead now and do the high score text. It's just going to be on the bottom, but a little smaller. So let's go ahead, right click on control. Let's do another label. Let's go ahead change the name to high score. Awesome. Let's go ahead and make the box a little bigger. It doesn't have to be as big as the other one, but fairly big enough. Awesome. All right, let's go ahead and move this over, match it up with this one here. Once we can get it matched up. Let's go ahead and move this down. I'm going to put this down over here. Let's put 100 there so we can see it better. Let's go ahead and center everything out. Awesome. And I want this to kind of match with the one above it. So something like there. Awesome. Let's go ahead and set the label settings with a new label setting. Let's increase the font. And we did 100 or 120 for the last one. So let's see what maybe 60 looks like for this one. Maybe a 70 might look a little better. You can adjust this however you want as well. I'm just putting this for now. And I think that's pretty good. And it looks pretty centered. Let's double check how it looks with that. Yep, looks pretty good to me. You can adjust it more if you want to. I think it might be a little bit more. But another way we can do this as well is simply just center it there and then there. And we can do the same one for the other one. Just take each corner and bring it over here and bring it over here. Awesome. All right, perfect. That looks a little better. I like it. All right, now that we got both of those there, that's great. I'm going to close up the background. Looks like I opened it by mistake. All right, awesome. Let's go ahead and add all these timers now. So we're going to add the first timer, which is going to be the enemy spawner timer. So let's add that from the arena. So right click on it, add child node, timer. Let's go ahead and add that. And we're going to go ahead and rename this capital E enemy underscore spawner timer. Awesome. And we're going to go ahead and change the wait time of this one to 3. We can adjust it later if we want to. And we want this one to be on auto start, okay? Because of course when our enemy spawner is on, we want it to start exactly when the game starts so we can start spawning the enemies. All right, awesome. All right, next up, we're going to go ahead and create another one. Right click, add child node, timer again. This one's going to be the difficulty spawner. So let's go ahead and do difficulty underscore. We'll do just difficulty timer. We don't need to call it wave or anything like that. Awesome. And again, we're going to set this to auto start, but we're going to keep the wait time at 1 second. We can increase that and lower that later, but for now I think it looks pretty good. Awesome. All right. Next up is we're going to create the timer for the camera shake, which is going to be inside of the camera 2D. So we're going to right click on camera 2D, add child node, create a timer for that. Awesome. Now this one is not going to be auto start, but it is going to be at 1 shot because we're only going to want it to initiate when it's told to. And for now we can keep it at 1 second. Awesome. All right. And you know what? Let's also go ahead and change the name. We could call this screen underscore shake underscore timer. All right, perfect. Okay, make sure you have all that there. Make sure you got your score text and your high score text inside of your UI components. Perfect. All right, don't forget to save. So far, so good. All right, so in this section, we're going to create a global script. Now, this global script is going to be used to house all of our variables outside of our main scene. In the past, we usually house them in the main scene node, but that's not very efficient. We can lose things along the way with that, so it's better to put it in its own separate little world, okay? And we're going to do that with this global script. Now, in this global script, outside of holding the variables, we're also going to create a function for efficiently creating new nodes in our game, such as the enemies. So let's go ahead, jump right in, and get started. All right, let's get started creating that global script. Now, like I mentioned before, the global script is going to be separate from our main node arena. Think of it as basically the arena is its own island, and then we have our global script on another island, okay? So these are not going to be connected in any way. So if we restart the arena node, then it's not going to restart our global script, and that's why it makes it really good to store our variables and also some functions in it as well. All right, awesome. So to create a global script in Godot, we simply go to Project Settings. Make sure you are selected on the Globals tab right up here. And then we can go ahead and give it a name. I'm going to give it a name of capital global. Let's go ahead, add that. I'm going to change this lowercase global to uppercase so it matches the name. Awesome. Let's go ahead and create that, and there we go. There's our global script. Awesome. Let's go ahead and close that up. Now let's go ahead and locate it and open it. So let's scroll all the way down. Let's double click on our global.gd, and there's our script. Awesome. All right, perfect. You can ignore this error we have here. All right, so in here we're going to add a couple things. Starting off, we're going to have all those variables I mentioned. So let's go ahead on line 3 and start creating those. We're going to start off with a variable. This is going to be node underscore creation underscore parent equal null. Awesome. We're going to use this to help basically create our nodes with a specific parent set, but at the beginning of the game we want to set that to null, which is nothing. Then we're going to go ahead and do another variable. This one's going to be the player, and we're also going to equal that to null. Perfect. Next up, we're going to do the variable for points, and we're going to go ahead, start that off equaling it to 0. Perfect. Then we're going to go ahead and do another variable for the camera. We're going to equal that to null also. All right, awesome. Next up, we're going to do a variable for the high score and equal that to 0 starting off. Awesome. And then last but not least, we're going to create a variable for game off and equal that to false starting off. All right, awesome. All right, make sure you have all those in there. Now again, we're adding these in here because we want to be able to access them through other scripts in our game. All right, so let's go ahead and create the one function we're going to add in here. Now this function is going to basically help us create nodes within our game using an outside script, the global script. Now why are we doing it this way? Well, it basically helps us create it and keep track of things a little better when we keep them separate. Because like I said, if we have the arena and the main global script in the arena, if we ever change the arena, then we're going to have some issues. So we kind of want to manage all these things in its own separate script. All right, so let's go ahead and create this function. We're going to do function, and we're going to call this instance underscore node. And in this instance underscore node, we're going to go ahead and add some values that we're going to need when we create something, such as what we're creating, which is going to be called the node, comma. We're also going to want the location of where we want it, so we're going to add a location, comma, and then one more for what the parent we want to set, such as maybe the arena, the player, who knows, maybe even the UI. All right, let's give that a colon. All right, next up, we're going to add a variable, and we're going to go ahead and call this node underscore instance equal that to node dot instance or initiate. Make sure I get that right. It doesn't automatically give it to you. All right, initiate. Perfect. Next up, we're going to add a parent dot add underscore child parentheses. Inside the parentheses, we're going to pass in the node instance we have above it. Awesome. Which is going to add the parent to whatever child we set as the node instance. Okay. Then we're going to go ahead and add the node instance that we just created. Dot global position. Global position equals the location that we're passing in as well. Awesome. And then last but not least, we are going to return the actual node instance. All right, awesome. So again, all this is going to do is just help us create our nodes, such as the enemies or other things we want in the game, the player, all that stuff, by passing in the node that we want, the location, and then the parent of whichever node we create. All right, awesome. So go ahead, save that. Perfect. All right, let's go back to 2D view, and you should be set. So far, so good. All right. right, so in this section, we're going to create the player object. We're going to start off creating the player with a sprite 2D and then adding the sprite to it. Then we're going to go ahead and add a timer for the reload speed. And also we're going to add area 2Ds for the hitbox and the aim spot. Let's go ahead, jump right in, and get started. All right, let's go ahead and get started creating the player. So what we're going to do for this is we're going to create a new scene for the player. So let's go to the top left, new scene. Let's go ahead and select other node, and we're going to start this off with a sprite 2D. Let's select that. Let's create. Awesome. All right, for the sprite 2D, we need to first drag and drop the image we want for the player. So first thing we should do though before that is rename our sprite. Let's just call this capital P player. Awesome. All right, let's go ahead and find the player we want to use. And I think we got a pretty good selection up here a little bit. Let's get to where we want it. It should be coming up. Let's see if I can find it. I don't think it's going to be in this one, that's the tiles. But if we go ahead and look for soldiers or even the survivors, let's see which one looks good. Actually, you know what? I think the best one might be the man blue, kind of like the blue color. And we want to use the one where he's pointing the gun. There's a couple of them, but I think this one might work best. Actually, the machine gun one. Let's do that. You can use whichever one you want, but I'm going to use the machine gun one. Let's go ahead, drag and drop that in. Awesome. Let's go ahead and go to the texture. Let's go ahead and make the filter nearest. There we go. Awesome. And I think we might want to make him a little bigger because you can see the size of the screen. So let's go ahead and go to the transform. Let's set this to 2 and see how that looks. Yep, I think it looks pretty good. Awesome. Perfect. Make sure to click enter there as well. All right, now we have our player. Next up, let's get a timer for the reload speed. So we're going to right click, add child node. Let's add a timer. Perfect. And let's just go ahead and rename this reload underscore speed. And we're going to set some things for that. We're going to want to do the one shot, okay? And I think a good speed for this is 0.2, and we can change that later. But for now, we'll keep it at that. Awesome. All right, next thing we're going to do is the hitbox. So let's right click on the player again, add child node. Let's create an area 2D. Let's rename this. I'm simply going to call this capital H, hitbox. Perfect. Now, of course, we need a collision. Let's right click, add child node. Let's add a collision shape 2D. Perfect. Let's give it a new shape. I'm simply going to set this to new rectangle shape 2D. And let's go ahead, zoom in a little bit. And let's make this surround the player. I'm going to do something like there. And let's do there and there. You can adjust it however you want, but I think this will work pretty well. Awesome. And now we just need the aim spot. So let's right click on player, add child node. And again, we're going to use an area 2D. Let's go ahead and call this the aim spot. Awesome. And for the aim spot, I'm simply just going to move it to where we want the aim spot to be. And I'm going to put that just right on the tip of the gun over here. Just right about there, right in front of it. Awesome. All right, and we're not going to add a collision there. We just want to use it for the location of the aim spot, okay? Awesome. So go ahead and save this, Control S. Let's go ahead, save the scene. And there we go. Awesome. All right, so far so good. All right, so in this section, we're going to create the player script. We're going to start off creating the script for the player. Then we're going to add the ability for the player to move and attack. Last but not least, we're also going to add the ability for the player to be defeated by an enemy. Let's go ahead, jump right in, and get started. All right, let's get started creating the player script. So let's go ahead, select the main node of the player, which is that 2D sprite. Let's go ahead, add a script to it. We can keep the name as player.gd. Let's go ahead and add that. Awesome. All right, from here, let's get rid of everything we have down there so we can start from scratch. All right, So let's go ahead and add a couple variables in here first. We're going to do a variable for speed, and we're going to go ahead and equal that to 300. Next up, we're going to do a variable for velocity, and we're going to equal that to a vector 2. And for now, we're going to leave that empty. All right, so we're not going to give it any value at all. All right, next up, we're going to go ahead and create a variable for the bullet. We're going to equal that to a preload, which is going to be an object within our game. And currently we don't have it created yet, but eventually it's going to be located in our res : / and we're going to give it the name of bullet. It's going to be a .tscn. All right, perfect. So keep that for now, because eventually we're going to add that. It might stay red for now, but that's okay. All right, next up, we're going to create a variable. We're going to call this can_shoot, and at first we're going to equal that to true. Okay, awesome. Next up, we're going to go ahead and create another variable. This one is going to be a variable for is_dead, and we're going to equal that to false starting off. All right, awesome. All right, make sure you have that there. Perfect. We're going to add one more variable. This is going to be an @onReady, and we're going to call this aim, S spot, and we're simply just going to equal that to our aim spot over here, so we can drag and drop it in, and we're going to have that location. Awesome. All right, perfect. Now that we have all the variables, let's get started making some of the functions. So let's go ahead and start off creating a function for _ready, which is going to be everything at the start of our game. Inside of here, we're simply going to set our global .player to self. Okay, so if you remember, that global script is going to be something we can access from anywhere. So any object that has a script, like the player, the enemy, the bullet, we can access that global section and grab any one of those variables, such as the player variable, and we're going to make that equal this player. Okay, awesome. All right, next up in that ready function, we're also going to go ahead and do another call to the global script. Global.gameOff equals false. Okay, because when we first start the game with the player, we want to make sure that the game is not turned off. So we're going to equal that to false. Okay, awesome. All right, now we're going to create one more function. This function is going to be for when we exit the game, so _exit tree. And inside of this, we're simply going to set our global.player back to null. All right, now why are we doing this? Well, we want to keep our global script clean and make sure that once this player is defeated, we want to set our player back to null. Okay, so make sure you do that to keep things clean. Go ahead and save what you got so far. Awesome. All right, let's continue on with the player script. So next thing we're going to do is create a process function, and this function is going to be for everything updated throughout the game, such as checking to make sure the player is not moving or is moving, and also whether or not he's shooting bullets. So let's go ahead and add that real quick. Let's do function _process with delta inside of its parentheses. Next up is we have to actually calculate which key is being pressed and getting a value for it. So to do that, we're simply going to go ahead and do our velocity.x equals int parentheses I input dot is action pressed, and then we're going to go ahead and select which action we want. Let's go ahead and create those because we haven't created those yet. So top left, project settings, go ahead, make sure you're selecting input map. Now in the add new action, let's go ahead and simply add move _right. Let's add that in. So for move right, we're going to go ahead and give it a key. Let's give it the D key. There we go. Let's go ahead now and do move _left. Add that in. Let's add a key for that as well. It's going to be A. Awesome. Let's go ahead now and do move _down. Let's add that key. And if you guessed it, it's going to be S. There we go. Perfect. Let's do another one. This is going to be move _up. Add that in. And this one is going to be W. Awesome. All right, one more we can add as well. This is just going to be for the clicking for shooting the bullets. We're simply going to call this click. Add that in. Go ahead and we're going to add the mouse buttons and go ahead and select the left mouse button. Okay, awesome, perfect. So these are going to be all of our inputs. That's going to be great. Let's do close. Awesome. All right, so now in here, if you go backspace and give it parentheses again, you should now see the new ones. All right, perfect. So we're going to start off here with the move right, which is going to be equal to a +1. Now, of course, if we do the other one, we want to minus that. So let's do minus, and then we can simply just copy the whole thing, paste it in, and change the move right here to move left. Awesome, perfect. Because if we're going to be moving right, it's going to be +x, and of course, if we're going to be moving left, it's going to be negative. So let's do a similar thing for the y. So let's copy the whole thing, enter right below it, simply change that .x to a .y, perfect. And then what we're going to do is we need the positive value over here. We need it to be move down, because in the y value, if you remember in Godot, if you add y values, it's going to move down. If you remove them, it's going to go up. So then we can go ahead, change this one to move up. Awesome, perfect. So now we can get a sense of direction for our player. Now, next thing we're going to do, which helps prevent diagonal movement, is a velocity equals velocity dot normalized. Okay, so this just helps us prevent diagonal movement, because if we didn't have this, then our player would go faster in diagonal way, and so we're going to just add this to make the game look a lot smoother. All right, awesome. Now next up is, of course, when our player gets to the edge of the map, we don't really want him to keep going, so we can simply add something here to prevent that. We can do a global position dot x equals clamp, and we're going to clamp the global position dot x, and we're just going to guess the size of the player, which is going to be 20, and I think the screen is 620. Awesome. For the width, we might change that later. Perfect, so make sure you have that there. Should be good, unless I forgot a comma. Yes, I did, comma right there. Awesome, perfect. So let's do that same thing now for y. So this is going to be the y value of the screen, so the up and down part. So instead of x, we're going to change that to y, and instead of .x over here, we're going to change that to y as well. We can keep the 20, but we are going to change the height of the screen to 340. Well, it's not going to change the height, it's just going to guess that that's the height. We might change it later, but for now I think this is fair enough. Awesome. All right, perfect. So now we can prevent the player from going too far out the screen. That's good. Now we need to actually give the speed to the player, but we only want the speed to happen when the player or the game is running. Okay, so let's go ahead and create an if statement. If, let's do is dead equals false, colon, and then we're going to go ahead and do our global position plus equals speed times velocity, which is our direction, times delta, to make sure everything matches up with the frames of the computers. Awesome. All right, perfect. So that's going to make our player actually move. All right, perfect. So make sure you have that there. Awesome. Now we're going to go ahead and do the next thing, which is going to be the click for shooting our bullets. So let's go ahead and create that. We're still inside the function process. So right down here, let's go ahead and do another if statement. If input, and we're going to do dot is action pressed. And inside of this, we're going to use that click that we created. Awesome. We're going to do an and global dot node creation parent does not equal to null and can shoot is true and is dead equals false. So when we don't make something equal something, that just by default makes it equal true. Okay, just saves us a little time in our script. Awesome. All right, let's continue. Or you know what, we got to put colon on the end of this false over here. Perfect. Make sure you have that there. And it should not be red anymore. Well, once we add something in. All right. Next up, we're going to go ahead and do a look at. And then we're going to give it some parentheses. We're going to do get underscore mouse position, wherever that is. Looks like I don't see it. Mouse. Is it local mouse or hold on? Nope, global mouse position. Okay, awesome. Get global mouse position because we want to make the player face the mouse. That's going to be his little aim spot. Okay, awesome. Next up, we're going to go ahead and do a capital global dot instance node. So we're going to be actually creating that node now with that function we made in the global script. But if you remember, we need to pass some things into it, such as what it is, which is the bullet, comma. Then we're going to do aim spot dot global position. That's going to be where. And then we need to give it a parent, which is going to be from global dot node creation parent. Okay, awesome. So that's what's going to actually create that bullet. All right, perfect. Next up, we're going to do a reload timer call. So go ahead and drag and drop that reload speed. Then we're going to do dot start because we're going to start the timer immediately. Awesome. Once we click, because we don't want to just instantly shoot our bullets continuously. We want to have a little bit of separation in between them. That's why we're having that there. Then last but not least, we're going to send can shoot. We're going to equal that to false. Okay, awesome, perfect. All right, I know that was a lot. Make sure you got all that down, but we're looking good so far. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up our player script. We're going to just create 2 more functions and then we should be good. So underneath the function process, we're going to create a new function. And actually, we're going to go ahead and just take this from the reload speed timer. So go ahead and select reload speed. We're going to go to the node. Well, make sure you're selecting it. There we go. Go to the node. And then for the timeout, let's go ahead, double click that. Make sure we're adding that on the player script. Let's go ahead, connect that. Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and make this a little closer. All right, so in here, all we're simply going to do is make can shoot and equal that to true, okay? Now this is going to be the time in between when we can shoot, and if you remember, we set that to 0.2. You can increase that or decrease that. That's completely up to you. Awesome. All right, next function, which is going to be our last one for the player script. We're going to go ahead and select our hitbox. Let's go to node, and then area entered, okay? Because of course we need to calculate something when an enemy enters the enemy enters the player. All right, let's double click that. Let's connect that. Perfect. I'm going to make it a little closer. Awesome. All right, so in here, we're going to add a couple things. We're going to first give it an if statement for the area. So if area dot is underscore in group. Oopsie. Let's just do is underscore in underscore group. There we go. Give it some parentheses. And what we're going to eventually make is the enemy, capital E, enemy. There we go. Awesome. Give it a colon. All right, next thing we're going to do inside of this is we're going to set is dead, and we're going to equal that to true. Okay, awesome. All right, next up is we're going to set the visibility of our player to false, so we'll no longer see the player. Awesome. We're also going to go ahead and call our global script global.player, and we're going to equal that to true, or not true, whoopsie. We're going to set our game off to true, not our player. That wouldn't make sense because our player is a bool, or our game off is a bool, and the player is just going to be a value for an object. All right, then we're going to go ahead and do an await. Inside this await, we're going to use get underscore tree. And then we're going to do a dot create timer and simply do a wait time of 1.0 seconds. And then we will do a dot timeout. And all this is doing is it's just creating a simple time that's going to wait before the game goes ahead and restarts. Now when the game restarts, we of course need to do the get underscore tree. And then what we've used in the past, the reload, well, dot reload current scene. Awesome. Perfect. All right, so that's going to be everything in our hitbox area entered. Again, it's going to be an if statement looking for if whether or not that is equal to an enemy. Then we're going to set is dead to true. We're going to set the visibility of our player to false. Set our global variable of game off equal to true. Wait 1 second and then restart the game. Okay, awesome. All right, so I know that was a lot. Make sure you have everything down for each function, such as the function for the area entered, the function for the reload speed timeout, the big one for the process, which has all of our movement inputs and the click to create a bullet, the exit tree, the ready, and then of course all of our variables. Now I know this one is red and it's still red. We're going to create that in the next couple sections. Awesome. All right, don't forget to save. So far, so good. All right, so in this section, we're going to create the bullet object. We're going to start off creating the bullet object with a sprite 2D. Then we're going to add a visible on-screen notifier. Then after that, we're going to add a hitbox with a group tag for enemy damager. Let's go ahead, jump right in, and get started. All right, let's get started creating the bullet. So let's go ahead. First thing we're going to do is create a new scene for it. So scene, new scene. Let's select other node, and this one is going to be a sprite 2D. Make sure you have that selected. Awesome. Let's go to create. Perfect. Let's go to 2D view real quick. All right. From here, let's go ahead and rename it. Let's call it capital B bullet. Perfect. Next thing we can do is actually give it an image, and I'm simply going to find a white tile that we can use for it, or just a colored tile. So let's go to tiles. Let's use something light like this tile right here. Let's go ahead, drag and drop that into our bullet. Awesome. Now we need this to be a lot smaller. So let's go ahead, go to the inspector for it. Let's go to the transform. And what I want to do is let's make this let's see what 0.3 looks like. That looks pretty good, I think. We can decrease it more or increase it, that's up to you. But I think that's pretty good for now. Awesome. All right, next up, let's go ahead and right click on it, add child node, and we're going to create a visible on-screen enabler. And what this is going to do is basically help us get rid of it over time, because we don't want a bunch of these just constantly being created and never getting deleted. So the visible on-screen enabler helps us do that, and you'll see that in action once we get the script going. But for now, we can leave everything the same on it. Awesome. Next up though is we need to give it an area so it can affect the enemies. So let's go ahead, right click, add child node. We're going to go ahead and give it an area 2D. Awesome. And we can call this hitbox, capital H, hitbox. Perfect. Let's go ahead and give it a collision shape. So right click, add child node, collision shape 2D. Let's add that in there. Perfect. Let's go ahead and give it a new shape. Let's do the rectangle shape 2D. All right, let's go ahead and just make sure this wraps around the button completely, or not the button, the bullet. There we go. And there we go. Awesome. Perfect. Now the one thing we do need to add though is we need to add a group tag. Okay, so we're going to select the hitbox right here. And to go to the group tags, simply select node, and then you can see groups. Now groups helps us tag things with certain items so we can basically differentiate what is hitting us. This is just a nice little thing because of course we could have multiple types of bullets, or maybe even multiple types of enemies that we want to do different things for each one. So tags are a great way to organize all that. So let's go ahead and add a new one. So I'm going to do plus. Let's give it a name. And we're just going to call this enemy damager. Let's go ahead, hit OK, and there we go. Awesome. And you can tell it has a tag by simply looking at that little square with a dot in the middle. Awesome. All right, go ahead and save that. Select save. Perfect. Looking good so far. All right, in this section, we're going to create the bullet script. We're going to start off creating a new script and attaching it to the bullet. Then we're going to add the ability for the bullet to move. After that, we're going to add the ability for the bullet to be removed when leaving the screen. Let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, let's get started creating the bullet script. So let's go ahead, select the main node of the bullet, add a script to it. We can leave the name as bullet.gd. Let's create that. Awesome. All right, let's get rid of all the code we have here except the extend sprite 2D. Now we're going to start off creating a couple of variables. So let's create a variable for velocity. And we're going to equal that to a vector2. And we're going to set our vector2 x to 1 and then the y to 0. All right, perfect. Because we're just going to give it a forward speed of 1, or not just speed, forward direction of 1, which is going to be that x value. For the speed though, we're going to do a variable speed. And we're going to set the current speed to 400. We might change that later, but for now I think this looks pretty good. All right, one more variable we're going to set is going to be called look_once. And this is just going to help us initiate the look right at the beginning of the game. And we're going to set that to true. All right, awesome. So let's go ahead and create the process function now. This is going to calculate all the rotation and then where exactly it's going to look and the speed. So let's go ahead, do function _process delta within parentheses. Let's go ahead and add a simple if statement inside of it. If look once equals true, colon. Then we're going to go ahead and we're simply going to set look at, and then we're going to do get _ global mouse position. So all this is doing is just making our object look towards the mouse position, which is what we want. And then after that, we're simply going to set look once to false, so it doesn't keep rotating it. We only want it to rotate once towards the mouse, all right? Then what we're going to want to do is, of course, move the object. We're going to do a simple global position plus equals the velocity dot rotated. And within rotated, we're going to go ahead and set it to rotation. All right, awesome. That's going to get the rotation of the object. Then we're going to go ahead and times that by speed times delta. All right, perfect. So that's going to help make our object go towards the way it's rotated to. All right, awesome. All right, the next function we need is going to be, of course, when we want the object to get deleted when it leaves the screen. And we can do that in a simple way using the visible on-screen enabled 2D node. So let's go ahead, select that, go to its nodes over here, and then use the screen exited one right here, not the entered, the exited. All right, double click that, make sure it's selected on the button, and then connect it. Perfect. All right, now within here, all we're going to do is just set this to queue free, which gets rid of the node. All right, awesome. So make sure you have all that down. Perfect. I'm going to save this. Awesome. All right, let's go ahead now and test this out in the arena. So let's select arena, and I added the player earlier just to test things out before I started. I'm going to delete this though. So there shouldn't be a player in, but we need to add one in. So I'm simply going to find the player, which is going to be player.tscn. Drag and drop him into here. Perfect, just like it was before. There we go. I'm going to go ahead, save the arena. Awesome. And what we want to do is just go ahead, hit play, and see what we get. Now, currently my player's in the top left, and we can move him around. We can't shoot though, so there's a problem there. And it looks like he gets stuck, but I think I know how we can fix these things real quick. Let's close this. First thing though, let's go to the 2D view of the arena. Let's simply just move the player towards the middle. Then let's go into the scripts of the player. And two things we got to change. One is it's getting stuck because we set the screen width and height wrong. I think I just miscalculated it. We can go to the project though, project settings, and just type in W for window, and you should see window tab right here. And there's the actual width and height, so we can simply copy it. So I'm going to copy the width and then close it, paste in the width for the X, and then let's do the same thing for the height. Copy the height, close that, paste this in, save that. Awesome. Let's go ahead, hit play, Let's make sure we can go where we want now. Looks like it. We're not getting blocked by the corners. Perfect. And it looks like it should stop us if we get to the top corner or the side corners, just like that. Awesome. You can adjust that if you want to, but I think it looks pretty good for what we got. Now, of course, we need to fix the shooting. And the reason why that's not happening is because we never set the global.node creation parent. It's still equaling null, which we need to make sure it doesn't equal null to initiate everything to shoot the bullets. Now, why didn't we set this yet? Well, because we're actually going to set this inside of the arena script once we get things to be created for the enemies and all that. But for now, just for testing purposes, we can go ahead and just grab this real quick, the global.node creation parent, and simply go into our ready. And for now, we can just go ahead and set this to the arena. So drag and drop it into there. And then we can put a comment that says, we are gonna add this in arena script later, just so you remember to get rid of this. All right, let's save that. Let's go ahead, hit play. Now we should be able to shoot bullets and face towards where we're shooting. Awesome. So there you go. Everything looks pretty good to me. I like it. Awesome. All right, let's close that. Let's go ahead and comment this out so we don't forget. Let's save what we got. So far, so good. All right, so in this section, we're going to create the enemy object. We're going to start off creating the enemy object with a sprite 2D. Then we're going to go ahead and add a hitbox for the enemy. And after that, we're going to add a stun timer to the enemy as well. Let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, let's get started creating the enemy object. We're going to start off creating a new scene for the enemy. So let's go to 2D scene first. Then let's go up to the top left, scene, new scene. Awesome. From here, let's go ahead and select other node. And we're going to be creating a sprite 2D. Let's select that, hit create, and there we go. All right, let's go ahead. Let's change the name of the sprite 2D to enemy. Perfect. All right, from there, let's go ahead and drag and drop our enemy into here. And we're going to be using a zombie. So let's go ahead and find our zombie guy. Should be zombie 1. So let's open that up. And I simply want to use the zombie with his arms sticking out like that. So let's drag and drop that onto the enemy. Perfect. All right, next up, let's go ahead, go to the inspector of that object. Let's go to the not the visibility, the texture. Let's change the filter to inherit to nearest, so it's a little clearer. Awesome. Then let's go ahead and change the size. Now I want to match this size to the same one we did for the player, so let's double click on player. So we can go over here and see what we did for size. Looks like we did 2 for scale. Let's go back to the enemy one. Let's go ahead, open up the transform and set it to 2 also. Awesome. All right, perfect. Now we got the size correct. That's good. All right, next thing we're going to do is we're going to add the hitbox. So let's right click, add child node. This is going to be an area 2D. There we go. Let's go ahead and rename this. Let's call this hitbox. Perfect. All right, from there, let's go ahead and add a collision shape 2D to that. Let's right click on it, add child node. Collision shape 2D. Perfect. Let's go ahead and give this a shape. Let's go to the shape, go to new rectangle shape. Let's zoom in a bit using the pointer tool up here. Let's go ahead and just put the box where we think it would be good. You can adjust it however you want, but I think this looks pretty good for what we're working with. Awesome. All right, next thing we need to do for this area 2D hitbox is we need to give it a group tag of enemy. So let's select hitbox. And let's go to the node and select groups right there. Perfect. Let's add a new one. This one's going to be enemy, capital E. Awesome. Make sure that check bar is there and also that it has the square around it. Perfect. Now, if you remember, we're making sure this says enemy on the player script. If we go to player, scroll down, there it is. So make sure it matches up exactly what that is. Awesome. Let's go back to 2D view. All right, one more thing we need to add to this is the timer. So let's go ahead, right click on the main enemy node. Let's go to add child node. We're going to add a timer. And this timer is going to be used for the stun when the enemy gets hit by a bullet. Let's just go ahead and just call this stun underscore timer. Perfect. Awesome. And let me double check what I want for the settings for that one. what we should do is make sure you select it, go to inspect. We're going to go ahead and make it a one-shot. And we're going to do something really short. We could do like a 0.1. We could make it longer if we want to as well. But we really just want to make the enemy stand still for just a tiny bit and then keep moving afterwards. Okay, awesome. Let's make sure we have that there. Perfect. Let's save this, Control S. Save it as enemy.tscn. And there we go. Awesome. All right, so far so good. All right, so in this section, we're going to create the enemy script. We're going to start off creating a new script for the enemy. Then we're going to add the ability for the enemy to walk towards the player. We're also going to add the ability for the enemy to get stunned by the bullets and be defeated once the health is 0. Let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, let's go ahead and get started creating the enemy script. So let's go ahead, select the main node of the enemy. From there, let's add a new script. We can keep it at enemy.gd. Let's go ahead and create that. Perfect. All right, let's go ahead and start from scratch. We're going to get rid of everything there except for the extend sprite 2D. Let's go ahead and add a couple variables now. We're going to start off with a variable for the speed, and we're going to equal that to, let's do about 75 for now. Then let's go ahead, create a variable for the velocity. Let's go ahead and equal that to a empty vector 2. Awesome. Give it an empty set of parentheses as well. Next up, let's go ahead and create a variable for the stun, and we're going to equal that to false. We're also going to go ahead and create a variable for the HP of the enemy, and for now we're going to just simply set that to 3. Okay, awesome. One more variable we're going to create. This is going to be for the blood particles, and we're going to go ahead and equal that to a preload, which we're going to create later, just like how we did with the bullets. But for now, let's go ahead and type where we're going to have it. It's going to be at res : and eventually we're going to call it blood _ particles .tscn. All right, and make sure that whole thing is wrapped in some double quotes, just like that, and just like that. Now it's going to stay red for a bit, but eventually we're going to create it and add it in. All right, so far so good. All right, let's continue. Now the next function we're going to create is going to be our process function. So we're going to have everything in there for the enemy's movement, rotation, and the state of the enemy. Let's go ahead and get started with that. So right under line 8 on 9, we're going to go ahead and create that function. Let's go ahead, do _ process with delta inside of its parentheses. Perfect. All right, so the first thing we're going to set is the enemy's rotation. So we're going to go ahead and use the function look at, and inside its parentheses, we're going to go ahead and do G global dot player dot global _ position. All right, because we want to make the enemy face the position of the player. All right, awesome. All right, perfect. Now next up is we're going to make some movement ifs. So let's do if G global dot player does not equal to null. So we want to make sure that the player exists, and stun equals false, because we don't want our enemy to be stunned so he can go ahead and attack and go forward. All right, awesome. We're also going to add another if statement inside of here as well. We're going to do if global dot game off equals false, because we want to make sure that the game is on for the enemy to move. Then we can go ahead and give the enemy some movement. We're going to do velocity is equal to global position dot direction 2, and if you guessed it, we're going to do G global dot player dot global position, just like that. Awesome, perfect. All right, then we're also going to go ahead and do an else. So this is going to be determining whether the game is off, and if it is off, then what we want to do is we want to set our velocity equal to a vector 2 parentheses of x value 0 and y value 0, because we don't want to make our player move, of course, when the game is off. All right, awesome. Make sure you got that there. Now outside of that else, but inside the first if, we're going to do an elif. So elif stun is equal to true. Then we want to go ahead and freeze our enemy, or slow him down a little bit, I guess. We're going to do a simple velocity equal lerp, which helps us get a number in between some values. We're going to do velocity, comma, vector 2, nope, not another velocity, capital V vector 2, a parenthesis of 0, comma, 0, and then another value of 0.3. So this stun is basically just going to slow it down a little bit, almost to the point of stopping, and that's what we want. I think it looks pretty smooth what we're making, so we're going to keep it like that. You can adjust it if you want to, but for now we're going to leave it. All right, awesome. So make sure you got that in there, perfect. Next up, we're going to do a global position plus equals our velocity that we set times the speed that we set times delta, so it can work in all frames. All right, awesome. All right, perfect. Next up, we need to do the actual HP of the enemy. So let's go ahead and do that. This is all still inside the process function. We're going to start this off with if HP is less than or equal to 0. Then we're going to go ahead, do another if global dot camera is not equal to null. And you know this isn't going to work until we create that camera, but that's okay. We'll create that eventually. We're going to do global dot camera dot screen underscore shake, which is going to be a function we're going to create in our camera, and we're going to give it some values of 30 comma 0.1. all right, and you'll see what that does once we get to that script, but for now we're going to leave it. Awesome. Now also inside of this if statement, we're going to do one more thing too. We're going to set our global dot points and we're going to go ahead and plus equal 10 points. So every enemy we defeat, we're going to get 10 points. You can make that different if you want. You can make it 1, you could make it 20, you can make it anything. Awesome. Then we're going to do another if statement. This is still inside of our HP one and our global camera one. We're going to go ahead and we're going to do if capital G global dot node creation parent does not equal null. Then we're going to go ahead and simply do a variable of blood particles underscore particles underscore instance equals global dot instance node, because we're creating a new instance in our game. We have to pass in, of course, what we're creating, which is going to be the blood particles, comma, global position of the current node, which is the enemy, and then we're going to do comma, global dot node creation parent. All right, perfect. Looking good so far. Awesome. All right, now that we have our new node created for the blood particles, we need to set some other things for it. So underneath it, I'm going to scroll back over here, make sure you have that there. It's all going to be inside that parenthesis set. Awesome. All right, now underneath the variable, we're going to go ahead and do blood particles instance. If it takes it, there we go. Dot rotation equals the velocity dot angle. Okay, perfect. So all that's going to do is help rotate our blood particles towards behind the enemy, which gives it a nice little effect. All right, awesome. So make sure you have all that down. Make sure you have that one here as well. I know that was a little long. The global dot instance node blood particles, comma, global position, comma, global dot node creation parent, ending parenthesis. All right, awesome. And then of course the line below it as well. All right, perfect. And then the one other thing we're going to do outside of the first if, we're simply going to do a queue_free, which is going to delete the enemy object once it's done. Awesome. All right, perfect. Make sure you got all that down for the process function, such as the rotation, all the if statements for the velocity, actually giving it speed, and of course the if statement for when it's defeated. All right, perfect. Save that. So far, so good. All right, let's wrap up the script. We only have 2 more functions left, and then we should be good with the enemy script. Awesome. All right, so the next function we're going to create, it's going to be outside, of course, of the process one. This one's going to be for the hitbox of the enemy. So we simply have to select the hitbox here. Go ahead, select the node, go to signals, and we're going to do area entered at the top. Let's go ahead, click that, make sure it's on top of the enemy with the script. Let's hit connect. Perfect, and there it is. Awesome. I'm going to go ahead, get rid of a couple spaces there. Let's remove the automatic pass that comes with it. Awesome. So what we're going to do is what we've done in the past with other enemy objects. We simply want to make an if statement first. Do an if area dot is underscore in underscore group, and then within its parentheses and double quotes, we're going to do enemy underscore damager. Now remember, this needs to match up with what we set on the bullet. So if we go to bullet and we go to the groups, it should be enemy damager. It looks like I did a lowercase e. So let's go ahead and make sure we do that as well for ours. Let's go back to the enemy script. Make sure to make that lowercase e so it matches up perfectly. All right, awesome. All right, next up we're going to do is an and we want to go ahead and do stun equals false. All right, because we don't want to keep hurting the enemy when he is already stunned. Okay, awesome. And you can take away that if you want to, but I think it looks better like this. All right, perfect. So far so good. It looks like I think I might need nope, I think it's okay. All right, then we're going to go ahead and do a modulate. And this is going to help change the color of our object, because if we go ahead to the bullets right here, go to the inspector, and you go ahead to the visibility, we have modulate here where we can go ahead and change that color of the object. So we're just doing that within the code. All right, so let's go ahead and we're going to do an equal color, and we're simply going to give it some parentheses and a quote, and we're going to change the color to FF0056, just like that. Okay, awesome. And we can show you what the color is going to be for this if we simply copy that. Let's go to 2D view, make sure we're selecting on the player though, or no, the enemy. Go ahead to the visibility of it, modulate, and simply paste it here for the hex code. And there you go. It makes it a little red looking, which is nice. It's going to turn it this color, just like that. All right, awesome. I'm going to change that back though. Should be, I think it was just FFF. If I go ahead, there we go. So it's going to make it flash a little red, which looks pretty cool. Okay, awesome. But let's keep it at white for now. I'm going to save that just to make sure it saves there. Let's go back to the script. All right, let's continue. Next up, we're going to go ahead and do our velocity equals minus, or minus equals. There we go. Or you know what? Let's just do equals and then make the whole thing negative. We'll do negative, and we'll do velocity times 6. There we go, which helps it move backwards a little bit. We're also going to go ahead and do HP. This time we'll do minus equals 1, which minus is 1. Awesome. Then we're going to do stun equals true, because now that the enemy is hit, we want him to get a little stun effect. Then we're going to go ahead and bring in where the stun timer is, which is right over here. So we can simply go ahead and just drag and drop it in and do a dot and do a dot start. Make sure it has that empty set of parentheses there as well, just like that. Okay, awesome. Next up, so we're going to go ahead and do area dot get parent, parenthesis set, and then dot queue free. It should be like that, underscore free. There we go, perfect. All right, awesome. Which is good because that's just gonna get that bullet to disappear when it hits the enemy, all right? Because we don't want the bullet to just keep passing through or keep pushing the enemy away. We want it to basically remove that bullet once it hits the enemy, all right? And that's what that code's doing. All right, next up is the actual timer one for the stun timer. So let's go ahead and add that in. Simply select the stun timer here, go to the node, make sure we are selecting the right one. Still on the hitbox for some reason. There we go, stun timer. Go to node, let's go to signals, and it's gonna be the timeout. Let's go ahead and make sure you're selecting the enemy node, connect. Awesome, let's get it a little closer. All right, so in here, we're gonna set something pretty simple. We're just gonna set our color back to where it was. So we could just simply actually just copy this here, paste it in, and we can grab the original color by simply going to the enemy here, going to inspector, opening up visibility, modulate, and there's that code, which is a couple Fs. Let's copy all those. There we go. And let's simply paste those in. There we go, perfect. So when our enemy is hit, it's gonna go ahead and make the enemy that little red color. And then after the timer is done, it's gonna change it back to what it was, all right? And of course, the other thing we gotta do is set stun back to false once the timer is done, all right? Make sure to add your equal there, perfect. Awesome, all right. Make sure you have everything we just did, everything for the hitbox, the if statement for the area, changing of the color, having the pushback velocity, minusing the HP, setting stun to true, starting the timer, and then deleting the bullet once it's hit. And then of course for the timer one, we're changing the color back and then also setting stun back to false. Perfect. Go ahead and save that. All right, so far so good. All right, so in this section, we're gonna create the enemy particles. We're gonna start off by creating a new particles using the CPU particles 2D. This is something Godot gives us to help make particle systems a lot easier. Then we're gonna go ahead and make sure all the settings are correct for the particle system. After that, we're gonna go ahead and add a timer for the enemy particles as well. Let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, let's get started creating the enemy particles. Let's go ahead and create a new scene for this. Let's go to the top left, scene, new scene. All right, we're gonna go ahead and do other node, and this is gonna be a CPU particles 2D, this one right here. Go ahead, select that, go ahead and create it. Awesome. All right, let's go ahead and rename it real quick. And we're simply gonna call it blood underscore particles. There we go. And remember, it needs to match up with our enemy script of this one here, blood underscore particles. Awesome. All right, let's go to the 2D scene view though. All right, for this, we're gonna set a couple things here on the right. I'm gonna stretch this out here so we can see a little better. All right, let's go ahead and make sure we have emitting turned on. Perfect. We're gonna go to amount, and I wanna change this to 15 because I think that's gonna look a little better. Let's open up the time. All right. For time, we're gonna go ahead and change the lifetime from 1 second to 0. Let's do 0.2 for now. We might change it later. All right, we can leave all these the same. We do want to set explosiveness to all the way. So let's set it all the way to 1, just like that. Awesome. All right, let's go ahead and make sure frac delta is enabled. Perfect. All right, let's go ahead and get the next things we want, such as the direction. Let's open that up. All right, for direction, we're gonna make sure that the X is set to 1, Y is 0. All right, awesome, but we do wanna set the speed 45, or spread 45's a little fast. So or a little too much. Let's do something like 18.9, and you can adjust this later if you want to. All right, awesome. Let's go to gravity. And we're going to go ahead and zero out gravity because this is a top-down game, so gravity doesn't play a role in this. Awesome. All right, make sure you got that set. Then we need the initial velocity. All right, an initial velocity, we're going to set the velocity minimum to 1. And we're going to set the maximum to, let's do something like 656. That should be enough. Awesome. Let me double check what else I need. We're going to need scale and all that, but we need an actual image for this. So we can go ahead and drag and drop in what we need for this. So let's scroll down. And I think we can find a circle object we can use for this in our tiles. So let's open up tiles, scroll down a little bit. And if I recall, I think there is one somewhere, like a little circle. Yep, perfect. This little white circle we have, it's going to be tile_132. Let's take that, drag and drop it into there. And there we go. See, that's our little circle. Awesome. All right. Now we're going to go ahead to scale. And let's take a look at how big it is compared to it. Actually, I think it's okay for the scale for now. I don't hate it, but if you want to adjust the scale, you can simply go to wherever the scale is over here, and you can go ahead and increase and decrease the scale. I think, though, what we could do is simply change the scale max. Nope, not the scale max, whoopsie. The scale minimum to something below 1. So we could do, let's do like 0.04. Okay, and then we're going to change the max just to, let's do 1 and see how that looks. There we go. Perfect. Awesome. All right, that should be good for that. You can adjust those if you want to. That's completely up to you. But I think for what we're working with, this is okay. All right, now we can do the color, which is pretty important because we need it to match the blood particles. So let's change the color over here. Let's try to get a red. And let's make it a little see-through. So let's do something like, 150 I think would be good for the transparency. Awesome. Perfect. So make sure you have it something like that. You can use the code here if you want to get the exact one, or just set it to whatever one you want. But I think it looks pretty good. Awesome. All right. Let's see what else we can set. Let's go ahead, scroll down. All right. Now I think we're good with the color. We could go to visibility though, and let's make sure the layering is good. We can keep those both on 1, I think. Awesome. The only thing we might need to change down the road is just the ordering, because we want to make sure it is still above the ground, like we can see it, and it's also going to be below the zombie and the player, and of course the UI. So eventually we might need to change the Z index, but I think for now we're just going to keep it at 0, okay? Awesome. All right, let's go ahead and save this, Control S. Save bloodparticles.tscn. Perfect. And we also need a timer though for here. So let's go ahead, right click, add child node, select timer, add that in there, perfect. Let's go to the inspector of the timer. And what we want to do for the timer is simply turn one shot on, and we want auto start on as well. And we're going to change the wait time. Instead of 1, we're just going to do 0.15, and you can change this later if you want, but I think this will work pretty good. All right, perfect. All right, there we go. Now we have our blood particles. I think it looks pretty good. We might need to adjust some things later, but I think it's good so far. Awesome. All right, don't forget to save. All right, so in this section, we're going to create the particle script. We're going to start off creating a new script for the enemy particles. Then we're going to go ahead and add a function for the particles timeout signal. Then last but not least, we're going to ensure all the particles processes freezes once it's initiated. Let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, let's go ahead and get started creating this script. Let's go ahead, select the main node for the blood particles. Let's go ahead, add a script to it. We can leave the name as that. Let's go to create. Awesome. All right, let's remove everything here. Now this is going to be a pretty simple script. All we want to do is just ensure that all its processes freeze once the timer goes off. Now let's go ahead, select timer, go to node for timeout. Let's make sure it's selected on the blood particle script, hit connect, and there we go. Awesome. All right, now in here we need to freeze a couple things, which is all the processes for the actual particle system. So let's go ahead and do the first one, which is going to be set underscore process. And we're going to go ahead and set that to false, okay? Now you don't need to know exactly what all these do, but what we want to do is basically just freeze all the motion and it completely, because we don't want it to keep coming out over and over again. We just kind of want it to appear and then freeze what it is for a bit, all right? So we're going to do another one. This one's going to be set underscore. We're going to do physics process. Set this to false. All right, awesome. Another one. This is going to be set underscore process input this time. We're going to freeze that as well by using false. We're going to go ahead and we're going to do one for set underscore process internal. Set that to false as well. Awesome. Let's go ahead and do another one. This one's going to be for set process unhandled. So set underscore process, and is it unhandled input? There we go. Set that to false on the inside of it. And one more. We're going to do set underscore process unhandled key input. All right, and set that to false as well. Perfect. All right, so again, all these are going to do is just basically freeze all the processes that are going on inside of the blood particles. Okay, all right, go ahead and save that. Perfect. Now we're going to test this out in just a bit. We just need to finish up a couple more scripts and then we should have our enemy working completely. All right, so far so good. All right, so in this section, we're going to create the camera script. We're going to start off creating a new script and then attaching it to the camera. After that, we're going to add the ability for the camera to shake. Then we're going to go ahead and add the camera to zoom out when shook as well. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, let's get started creating the camera script. So let's go ahead and go back to our main scene in Arena. Awesome. From here, let's go ahead and select our camera 2D. Let's go ahead and add a script for it. Create. Perfect. All right, let's go ahead and start from scratch. I'm going to get rid of everything I have in here. Perfect. Let's start off creating a couple variables. We're going to start off creating a variable for the screen underscore shake underscore start. And we can go ahead and equal that to false at first. Awesome. Then we're going to go ahead and do another variable. This one's going to be called shake intensity. And we're going to go ahead and at first equal that to 0. All right, awesome. All right, so now we need to create a couple functions. The first one we're going to do is our function ready, which if you remember is going to be everything at start. Let's go ahead and simply set it our global dot camera equal to self. All right, awesome, because this of course is going to be our camera that we're going to be using in the game. Then we're also going to go ahead and do what we've done in the past of a function underscore exit tree. And for our exit tree, we're going to go ahead and do global dot capital C camera equals back to null. All right, because when we leave the scene, we want to make sure that all resets. Awesome. All right, perfect. Make sure you got all that. So far, so good. All right, before we close out of this section, let's go ahead and test everything out. So what we want to do first is, of course, drag and drop an enemy into our arena. So go ahead and find that. Should be towards the bottom, enemy.tscn. Let's go ahead, drag and drop that into the main arena node. Perfect. All right, now let's go ahead and hit play and see what happens. All right, here's our little enemy guy. He's coming towards us. Looks like our player, though, isn't able to shoot because we forgot to do that one thing in the player script until we create it in the arena one. So let's see what happens when the enemy runs into us. There we go, restarts the game. That's pretty good. Let's close this and fix that one problem. Let's go to the player.gd. Should be in the function ready. We just have to uncomment that one right there for now. Let's save that. Let's go ahead, try again, hit play. All right, So now we can use our gun. Let's go ahead, shoot the enemy. Looks like it's just passing through him. So that must mean that his grouping is wrong. Let's go ahead, close that. And I actually think it's going to be in the bullet. And yep, looks like it because it doesn't have that symbol there. Looks like we only gave it to the collision shape. So let's select the hitbox here. Let's add the enemy damager. Awesome. Let's save that. Let's go back to the arena. Let's hit play. Let's try this now. All right, looks like we can still shoot. Enemy's still coming towards us. Now if we shoot the enemy, looks like he has that little flash and the stun. But this looks like a problem. It's the screen, so it looks like we need to refix where the position is going to be once the timer ends. Let's close that. We can fix that pretty quick though. Let's just go to the camera 2D. Now I think it's going to be coming from this guy here. Our global position is going to be setting it wrong here. So to fix that, we can simply select our camera 2D, go to the inspector, scroll down. It should be in this transform that we have, and it's going to be an X position of 576. So let's copy that value, set it for the one here. Let's go ahead, copy this one here as well, and set it right here. Oopsie, looks like it didn't copy the right one. There we go. Doesn't like it. I'll just type it in. 326. Awesome. All right, let's save that. Perfect. All right, let's try this one more time. 3 times the charm. All right, we can still shoot. Enemies coming towards us. We can go ahead and shoot the enemy. And there we go. Awesome. There's the blood, and also the screen shook as well. Perfect. Awesome. All right. Now one thing, don't forget before we close out, go to the player.gd. We have to re-comment this because we're going to create that in just a bit for another script. All right. Awesome. I'm going to go back to the 2D view for arena. Perfect. Let's save that. Awesome. All right. So far, so good. All right, so in this section, we're going to create the arena script. The arena script is going to be responsible for spawning in new enemies in the game. We're also going to allow the ability for spawning to increase over time. Let's go ahead, jump right in, and get started. All right, let's go ahead and get started creating the arena script. So let's go ahead, select the main node of the arena right up here. Awesome. Let's go ahead, add new script. We can leave the name as arena.gd. Let's create that. Perfect. All right, I'm going to remove everything we have in here currently. Let's go ahead and add a variable. This variable is going to be called enemy _1, and we're going to equal that to a preload. And we're going to go ahead now and select the enemy. All right. So we go ahead and either scroll down all the way to the bottom, or you can type it in manually. Make sure to do the enemy.tscn. Perfect. Awesome. All right. Next up, we're going to create a simple function on ready. So function _. There we go. In ready, we're going to simply set our global dot node creation parent equal to self. All right, and this is what we had to set in the past to test the game out in the player one, but now we can go ahead and just do it in the main node here. All right, awesome. All right, let's go ahead and create another function now. This function is going to be our exit tree one we keep creating. So exit tree. And what we're going to do on exit tree is we're going to simply set our global capital G dot node creation parent equal to null. All right, because when we leave the scene, we want to make sure we reset everything, especially removing the current parent that we have in case eventually we have more maps and more arenas and all that stuff. All right, awesome. All right, one more thing we could set also on ready is simply reset the score we have, and to do that we're simply going to do global dot points, and we can go ahead and make that equal 0. All right, awesome. All right, looking good so far. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up the rest of the script. We only have 2 more functions left, one for the spawning of the enemy and one for increasing the difficulty. So let's go ahead and do the spawning of the enemy first. That's going to be coming from the enemy spawner timer. Let's select that there. Let's go to the node for it, and for the timeout, let's click it. Make sure we are creating for the arena one, and there we go. Awesome. All right, so in this one, we're going to want to initiate the creation of an enemy at a specific location. So what we want is we want to spawn all the enemies around the map, so they'll come at different directions towards the player. All right, so let's go ahead and create that. Let's go back to script. All right, So what we want to put in here first is we want to simply put a variable. We're going to call this the enemy underscore position. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to equal that to a vector2. And this is going to be its random position that we're going to be calculating. So we're going to go ahead and do a random f range, random float basically. We're going to do -20, comma, and then the range of how big the screen is. If you remember, it's about like 150. So we're going to do a little bit farther than that, which is going to be, let's do 250. All right. So that's going to be our range for our x value. So if we go to the scene, it's going to be kind of a little bit like this, anywhere from here to here. All right. You can change it if you want to. You can make it bigger, you can make it smaller. But when we're about this distance, I think it'll be pretty difficult and pretty good for the player. So let's go back to the script. Let's do the y value now. So we're going to do a comma, again, a random float range. Now for these values, we're going to do a little bit more above and a little bit more below. So let's go ahead and do a -90 for above, and then a comma, a 690 for below. Perfect. All right. So again, back to the scene. This is going to be a little bit above the map and a little bit below, and that's what we want. We want to spawn the enemies, of course, not in the current screen, but coming into the screen, just like that. All right, let's go ahead now and create something to actually calculate if it's the correct position or not. And to do that, we're going to use something called a while statement. And a while statement is basically something that goes in a loop and will continuously skip over what it is until something equals something specifically. Because again, we don't want to be spawning our zombies in the current map of the player. We want it to spawn outside of it. So we need to add a couple statements in this. First one is going to be enemy position. And we're going to say .x is less than the value of 1,200, and we're going to do enemy position dot x is greater than -80. All right, and I think this works pretty well for our x positions of the zombie spawning. Let's do the y ones now. So we're going to do an and also. Enemy position dot y is less than 670. Make sure to add that space there, 670. And enemy position dot y is greater than -30. All right, awesome. Colon there. Next up, we're going to add the actual randomization of it. So we're going to go ahead and do our enemy position equals vector2, and we're going to go ahead, do a random f range again, and then we're simply going to do -120, comma 1,250, then we're going to do a comma again and a random f range. Inside of here, simply add again the -90, comma 690. All right, awesome. This is just going to help it spawn in random locations, of course, outside of what we wanted it to with the statement above. All right, awesome. So this is going to be looping through until it gets something that it wants that does equal one of these things. Okay, awesome. All right, now we're going to go ahead and set global dot instance node, and then we have to pass in all of our values, which of course is going to be that enemy 1, which is what we're going to spawn, comma the enemy position we just calculated, comma self, because we're making the parent object the self, which is going to be the arena. All right, awesome. Make sure you have that there. Perfect. Awesome. All right, I know that was a pretty big while statement. Make sure you have everything in there set correctly, because if you don't, it's going to cause some issues. All right, awesome. So that's going to be it for the spawning function. Now we need the actual difficulty increase function, and that's a pretty easy one to do. We just have to select the difficulty timer here, select its node, signals, and then of course the timeout. Make sure it's selected on the arena, hit connect. Awesome. I'm going to delete some of these here. There we go. Let's get rid of the default pass. All right, so in this it's going to be pretty simple. We're just going to do a simple if statement, and then we're going to grab our enemy spawner timer, put it in here, and we're going to do a dot wait time. If the wait time is greater than 0.5, then we're going to go ahead and grab that same enemy spawner, and then we're simply going to do a dot wait time minus equals 1. Okay, awesome. So we're going to slowly basically decrease the amount of time it takes to spawn an enemy over time. All right, perfect. So make sure you have all that in there, everything for the on difficulty timer, and then also everything for the on enemy spawner timeout. All right, perfect. Make sure to save that. Perfect. All right, we can go ahead and remove the current enemy we have in here. I'm going to delete that guy there. Hit OK. Awesome. Let's save that. Let's go ahead, hit play. Let's see how this looks. We can move around. We can still shoot. Awesome. There's our enemy. There we go. And you see them spawning over there. It's going to be spawning in random locations all outside of the map, which is exactly what we want. Awesome. Now, one thing I am noticing is it looks like the blood is on top of the UI and on top of the other enemies. So we have to change that Z index, so we can do that real quick. Let's go ahead and go to our blood particles. And let's go to the inspector. And let's find the order layer for the blood particles, which I remember is down here. Let's go ahead and set this to -1 actually. Might make it easier to do it this way. And then the other thing we can set is, of course, the ground to be below -1. So let's go back to Arena after we save this. Perfect. Let's go to Arena, go to Background, and we can go ahead and just select the top one there, scroll all the way down, Control or hold down Shift and select the bottom one. Perfect. Go to Ordering, and we can simply make this Z index a -2. Awesome. Let's save all those changes. Let's close the background we have right here. Let's hit play. And let's see how that looks. Wait for a zombie to spawn in. Perfect. And there we go. Looks like the zombies that were above the UI, we can change that also. But it looks like the blood is in the right location. I like it. Looks pretty good. Now for the UI, we can change that real quick. We can just simply go to the order of it as well. And wherever that is, ordering, let's go ahead and just make that 1, the Z index of the score, and then also 1 for the Z index of the high score. Awesome. And then we can hit play. Make sure to save though, test it out, and we should be looking good. All right. Let's wait for a zombie to get near. There you go. See how the zombie's underneath and the blood as well. Perfect. All right. Awesome. Don't forget to save. So far, so good. All right, in this section, we're going to create the score script. We're going to start off creating a new script and attaching it to the score label. Then we're going to go ahead and add the ability for the score to be increased and also save the high score. Then we're going to test it out and ensure all the functionality. Let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, let's go ahead and create the score script. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's select the score label right here. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead, add a script to it. We can keep the name as score.gd. Let's hit create. Awesome. All right, let's start from scratch. Get rid of all these things down here. Perfect. All right, it's going to be a pretty short script. We're only going to be updating the score label and then also the high score label. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to start off with a function underscore process. And we're simply going to go ahead and set the text of the current label equal to str string, and then we're going to go ahead and set it to the global dot points. All right, awesome. That's going to go ahead and match it up. Now we're also going to go ahead and set the high score. So we're going to go ahead, drag and drop the score label in right here. Perfect. Then we're going to do a dot text to set its text, and we're going to set that equal to str global dot high score. All right, perfect. Now that we have that set, we also need to set the new high score every time our score gets increased. So to do that, we're going to do function we're going to use the ready function. And in here, we're simply going to do an if statement, global dot points. If those points are greater than the global dot high score, then we're simply going to go ahead and set our global dot high score equal to the global dot points. All right. Oops, not the player, points. There we go. Perfect. All right. Because whenever our score gets higher than the current high score, we need to set that to the points. All right. Perfect. Go ahead, save that. Make sure you got both these functions here. Awesome. Let's go ahead, test it out. All right, so we're currently at 0 score and 0 high score. Let's wait till the game starts. We can start attacking some of the zombies. Our current score is going to be at 30. Let's see what happens though when we restart. It's currently at 30. Let's make sure that we can increase it though. So let's go ahead and we're going to get all the way to 40. And let's see what happens when we get a game over. There we go, it goes to 40. Now let's make sure it doesn't reset even though we are below it. So we're at 10, so it should stay at 40 if we restart the game. And there we go, awesome. All right, things are looking good. So far so good, don't forget to save. Congratulations on completing the third project. In this project, we created a top-down zombie game. We learned how to give our player top-down movement to follow and aim towards the mouse. We also learned how to set difficulty to our game and increase it over time. Some things you could add to this game are coin collection and upgrades to the player using those collected coins.